Good
Sri
morning.
Kumar Swami Mahavidyalaya Avsa, District Latur in Maharashtra State, is organized an international e-conference. It's a daily webinar series. For today's session, on the dais, Honorable Valerie Probstfeld, ma'am, she is there. So first of all, I heartily welcome to you, madam. I
Thank you
welcome
so
the Chief
much.
Organizer of the series, Honorable Dr. M. Betkar, sir. Also welcome all those dear attendees. Today's topic for presentation is Embracing Imperfection with Valerie Probstfeld, ma'am. So she is from USA. So with this brief introduction, now I request to you, madam, please start your presentation on the topic Embracing Imperfection with Valerie Probstfeld. You are most welcome, ma'am, please. But before you just give some details from your side and then you start. Most welcome,
Great.
please.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being able to present on this incredible platform. And I just love to be able to share my mission, talk about my mission, about embracing love over imperfection. And I have created a website as well as I have a podcast that I host. And my primary target audience is for moms, but also it can be applicable for really any individuals. And I think I learned so much once I became a mom of how I just don't have control over so much more of life than I thought I did. And so I think for me, becoming a mom was that like paradigm shift of, oh, I studied for this event for years. I wanted to be an A+ mom, and I feel like I am going to do everything exactly how I should be doing. But once my baby was born and I became a mom, my baby was taken to the NICU like within 5 minutes. And I was like, I didn't study for this. I did not know what to do. I felt like that illusion of control was ripped away from me. And for that was motherhood in my life experience. That could be motherhood or something different for you. But like whenever there was a time in your life where you felt like you were going to have it all together, and then that illusion of control was ripped from you. So I decided, and this took a few years, like I had to kind of like work through my feelings, my kind of emotions, a bit of the trauma from the NICU, writing down my thoughts as to how do I embrace this role in my life and not control, not like feel like I need to constantly control every outcome, because clearly I can't control every outcome of life. No one can. So I created what I essentially called Two Mamas to Love, because I was researching what is mom anyway. Like if we look up in the dictionary, the word mother, it is a noun title, which we all know, right? Like we are a mom, or we're a dad, or we're a business owner, whatever that is, our title. But also so many times there's a verb, and that was applicable for mom as well. There is the verb to mother, to mom. And according to Merriam-Webster, to mother or to mom means to give birth or allow one to rise or care for or protect. And I thought about that. I'm like, what gives birth? What allows one to rise, to care for, protect? And that is love. That is all I really can control. And so I wrote about that and I thought about that. And I'm like, I feel like so much of life, if I choose love over fear, love over control, or love over perfection, then I can live more in the moment. I can meet my kids more in the moment. I can meet my family, meet whoever that is with love. And that's an action that I can choose in every moment. Am I going to move forward in love or fear? So that's when I started writing my book, which will be out later on this year, as well as my podcast. I'm like, I just want to spread this mission that's just so simple, but yet so hard at the same time sometimes, right? I mean, I feel like we want to be perfect in life, or at least for me, I want to be perfect with everything. But life is not perfect. It's not. And if you look around, you see so many examples of that. In the United States, I'm in the Chicago area, which is the northern hemisphere. So we get a lot of seasons. And in the fall, there's these beautiful colors that the trees produce. They're green in the summer, but as it gets colder, as there's decreased light, there's decreased sun, the trees stop producing chlorophyll, which makes the green, like it's producing food for the leaves. And it produces colors, or it reveals colors that were in the leaves all along, like the golds and the oranges. And I think that's such a beautiful example of how imperfection or decreased light, darkness brings out something beautiful. And I think that really does so much of the time when we don't have that control, we still can embrace that moment for what it is. And a lot of that, being aware of letting go of control, takes practice. And I work on that every day. And some days are better than other days. Some hours are better than other hours. But the more I continue to work on it, the more it strengthens that pathway, which leads me a bit to kind of what I loved to do and what I still love to work on and research is a lot of the neuroscience of our brain. In the United States, before I became a mom, and I still am, I am a nurse practitioner. I worked a lot with pediatric neurology. I always loved to learn, how does the brain work? And I think it's just fascinating how we continue to grow. Like we are, as adults, we reach a certain height or whatever that is, but our brains are continuing to grow, albeit not at the same speed as our kids are, but we still are able to learn. Learning as an adult is a bit more difficult. It's a bit more challenging. But that's a sign that we are learning when it is challenging, when it is hard work. When I say, you know what, I'm going to work on letting go of control, letting go of my perfection tendency of whatever it is that I want to control, and just letting it be, and just embracing the moment with love for what it is. Love for this beautiful world we're in, love for watching my children, giving myself compassion. All of that takes practice and creates new pathways or strengthens pathways in our brain with neuroplasticity. And so if I previously was reacting with frustration or anger, with whatever that is, I can try to refocus that. Like, let's say, for example, I have young kids. They are 8, 5, now they're 8, 6, and 4. We are constantly running late all the time because kids want to play. They want to live in the moment. And it's frustrating. It is frustrating that we sometimes do not get places on time. And I may have a tendency to yell or to get frustrated about that. And I'm thinking, this does not make me look perfect. It doesn't. But at the same time, if I identify that that's kind of more in my head, that's more of what I feel like I created in my head versus the reality, and embracing my verb as opposed to my title. Like my title, mom, has so many expectations of like, I need to be on time places. I need to do this. But when I think about it, it's like, I can still embrace the moment with love. I can be mindful. I can exhibit gratitude for the fact that, my kids aren't going to want to play with me, or whatever that is. Like if they're older, just kind of being in the moment, being grateful for what it is. So much of life is just meeting everyone in the moment. So what I also want to talk about is these mental back roads and these mental highways, and kind of how I worked with that to create what I write about. And that is so much of, we have in our brains the amygdala, which I think a lot of us are aware of now, or it's becoming more common knowledge. The amygdala is that little almond in our brain, the fight, flight, or freeze center deep within our skulls. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front part of our skulls or our brains here. Okay. The prefrontal cortex is what makes us human. The amygdala, all animals share. It was interesting because we recently had a birthday party with my son, and we had snakes and reptiles come to the birthday party. And it was like a great company. They were like, oh, it's fine, all this stuff. But it was just a fun thing for like the little kids to have and to show. But I asked them, I'm like, do these snakes, which I already knew like they had an amygdala, but I wanted to talk more about that with them. Like, do they sense fear? Do they sense like, that, do they have the same fight, flight, or freeze? And in fact, they do. They have an amygdala. And for humans, our amygdala is just as primitive as that snake is, or the snake's amygdala, because it is designed to be primitive. It's designed to keep us safe. And safety is always paramount. We're going to have a mental highway to safety. The amygdala thinks, how can I keep myself safe in this moment? How can I not get bitten by the snake? How can I not get stung by a bee or whatever that is? It's very primitive. But for humans, in comparison to snakes, we have a prefrontal cortex, and we can think about, is this fear? Or is this anger, whatever that fight, flight, or freeze thing, is that real or is that imagined? And so many times it can be imagined. Montaigne gives a quote about, my life has been full of great misfortunes, most of which have never happened. And I think that's a very profound thing to think about, because remember, the amygdala turns on and off. It creates that sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, or freeze. Our heart rate gets elevated, our respirations get elevated. We want to yell, we want to control, we want to do these things. But sometimes the only thing we can really do in that moment is to say, amygdala, this is a false alarm. I know that I cannot control this in the moment, and I am going to respond as opposed to react. So again, I think that's an important concept, react versus respond. When I react, I'm using the amygdala. I'm using that snake reptilian part of my brain. Okay. I'm yelling at my kids for being late, or I'm ruminating about something that happened at work or whatever that is. My amygdala thinks there's a real danger, and it keeps that sound alarming. But if I respond, then I'm using the human part of my brain. Then I'm able to take that information. I'm able to take a mental back road in my head to say, how can I be grateful instead? How can I decrease this control? How can I show mindfulness? How can I take a step back and say, thank you, amygdala, for keeping me safe, but I'm okay, and I can push forward in this moment. And there's that space. So Viktor Frankl, he's a Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, famous psychiatrist, psychologist, he had said, between reaction and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our growth and our freedom. And I think that's so profound, where we have to remember there is that space. And I work every day on lengthening my space. And for me, that is, I struggle with perfection. I do. And I struggle with trying to control things. But if I work and try to strengthen those pathways and lengthen my space between reaction and response, I feel like I can work more at that. Okay. So another example that I just wanted to say about that is, I guess two examples, because I think they're both very interesting. The first one is, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Phineas Gage. He's taught a lot in America with healthcare providers or psychology, where he was a railroad worker in 1848 in the New England area. He was working on the railroad, and there was some unfortunate accident that there was an explosion and part of a rod went into his brain. So it went like this, right through the prefrontal cortex, essentially. And he did not die from this. He miraculously was able to recover, but he changed. His personality changed because that prefrontal cortex, what made him human, remember the response part of his brain, that was diminished. And his doctors said that too, as far as his doctors had said, like, he was more hard to have impulse control, would be arguing, acted more like an animal, which I thought is such an interesting concept of truly our brains are just so much more powerful than we realize. But I think what we don't learn about Phineas Gage is that later on, it was documented that he became a stagecoach driver in Chile, in South America. And so isn't that interesting that he was able to regrow some of that part of his brain? I mean, like, if you think about it, I don't see snakes or animals driving stagecoaches, right? Like, it does require some type of logical thought. And so I think that just speaks to the power of neuroplasticity and growth and how our brains can grow if we work on this. So that was something an example I wanted to give. And another example just of that, the control, the fight, flight, or freeze, which I think is just a funny one that I try to bring up sometimes when I talk, is when there was a bee in my car. A bee came into my car when I picked up my son from preschool one day. And my amygdala, my fight, flight, or freeze center, started reacting. There's an insect that could sting me, but really, I was trying to drive, and my amygdala didn't understand that distracted driving, was more harmful, more dangerous than the bee in my car. Unless I had some type of medical condition or whatever. But my amygdala did not understand that, and so it sometimes will mess with us because it does have a strong pathway. It wants us to keep us safe, but sometimes that thinking, for humans, we overthink things. And I think that's a lot of where this perfection comes from, this control comes from, ultimately comes from fear, from trying to make sure that everything is going to be okay, when sometimes we just have to kind of let go and embrace love and embrace the moment, because so much of life is not in our control. Thank you so much for the nice comments. I appreciate that. Thank you. And if anyone has any thoughts that they'd like to jump in with, feel free. And I think this would be a good opportunity for me to talk about. Thank you so much. I think if we have a moment, this would be a good opportunity to talk about the concept of self-compassion, because I think that helps me with imperfection and trying to embrace that. So John Gottman, he's a marriage researcher, and he talks about 5 positives to 1 negative. And what does that mean? That means when we are in a relationship with someone else, with our spouse, or he mostly focused on marriages, so our spouse, we should give 5 positives to 1 negative to counteract a negative reaction. So I think that's a great point, and I want to continue to do that. But also, what is an important relationship we don't think about? And that's with ourselves. That we should, or at least for me, I try to counteract a negative thought with 5 positive thoughts. And that is so much easier said than done. 5 is a big number. But I think it's an important process of allowing ourselves to create a back road, to create more self-compassion. And if I'm trying to control something, I want something to be perfect, identifying that as maybe not necessarily negative thought, because I think it is coming from a good place, but it's not a helpful thought sometimes, or at least for me. Sometimes it's like, oh, can I control this? And if I can't, being like, you know what, let me counteract that. Like, counteract that with 5 positives right now. And sometimes that can be easy to say, like, oh, I'm proud that, I did this today, or I did something else today. But sometimes maybe I'm not feeling like I can think of any positives. And if that's the case, just thinking of what did you do that was, maybe you brushed your teeth in the morning, maybe you got dressed, whatever that is. But the point is, it gets your mind off of that pathway of thinking of control or I'm not good enough or whatever that is. So I encourage you, the exercise that I would love for you guys either to do right now, or maybe take a note for later on tonight or sometime today, is to think in your mind or write down 5 positives that you can identify in yourself right now, or there's something that you did today that you're proud of. Because I really feel like all of us, we all are doing such great things, and we are entirely too hard on ourselves. Okay. So I'm just going to give a moment for a second, just either write that down now or take a note, a mental note, put in your phone or something to do that at some point today. Now, just briefly, I wanted to touch base on a couple. I had talked about mental back roads that help me with neuroplasticity, or at least trying to have my brain work on different ways to counteract that frustration or anxiety, like when we're running late or whatever. So I touched base on gratitude. I think that's such an important concept. And I think something that we need to start in society really embracing, because it can be so helpful for ourselves and our friends and our family. And I think it starts with having self-compassion, but also saying, what am I grateful for today? I love to, when I present, sometimes I'll take M&Ms, like those candies that there's different colors. So if you take a big bag, there are, I'm trying to remember the specific numbers, but I took a bag one day and put in approximately 3,652 M&Ms into a bowl. Okay. And why is that number significant? That number, 3,652, is 10 years of our lives. Okay. And if you look at this bowl, I should have got it for this presentation, but I do have a picture on my website or on my platform. It's not that big. Like it's a lot of candy, but really, if you think about it, like every day we're taking a piece out, and they could be different colors. You could have red days, you can have blue days, green days, yellow days, but they're all days in our lives. Okay. Out of those 3,652 days, there are 2,600 weekdays, Monday through Fridays, and 1,040 weekends. So, today's Monday, for example. How many of those Mondays are we kind of wishing kind of went faster, that candy went faster? When I am trying, again, easier said than done, but trying to embrace the moment, trying to embrace that candy for what it is for that day. I think someone had raised their hand. If they have a question open in the queue, if we have a question, I'm happy to answer here. But I just think that's such a powerful example. And I encourage you, there's actually some websites out there that you can calculate how old you are in days. And I think that's just an important thing for us to all realize. And then I talked a bit about compassion for ourselves, as well as mindfulness. I love mindfulness. I talked earlier about the trees, the fall, but I think nature gives us so many examples. Being mindful is really just appreciating life, being in the moment, going outside. For me, it's so helpful. And for everyone, we're all so different. We all have different values. But I really do think truly there is something important about humans and nature. And in the seasons, we have winters where there's the darkness and the snow, or at least in the Chicago area, there's a lot of snow. But there's spring. And I love how the flowers that are dormant in the winter, they pop up again in the spring, just showing that there is hope. I have a garden, love gardening. It's helpful for me for just living in the moment. But also, I think it's so interesting that certain leaves in the boxes will try to get as much sunlight as they can. And if there's other leaves crowding, like for example, right now, I have basil being kind of like crowded by some of the other leaves. I think they're strawberry leaves. I have to prune that garden so I can get all of those extra leaves out. So allowing that positivity to have sunlight, if that makes sense. I think for me, like those visuals really help, where we do have to prune our thoughts, prune those negative thoughts, prune that perfection, that control, in order to increase the sunlight, increase love into our lives. Now, as far as as far as the timing here, I don't know if Dr. Becker, do you want me to present more, do Q&A, or what are we thinking as far as for the remainder of the time for this presentation? Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to discuss, or anything that has helped them with control or perfection or gratitude or anything? I love to talk with others about like what has helped them in their lives.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Now it's time for discussion. Each and every participants are requested, if you have any query, please discuss with Honorable Keynote Speaker. Dear participants.
Looks like someone had raised a hand here.
Dr. Swanand Shukla, sir, please.
Hello. Good evening, Dr. Bedkar, sir, Principal, sir, Prashant, sir, and good morning, ma'am. Wonderful presentation you have made, and I think you started your session with your own experience. That is wonderful because the experience teaches us a lot, and you have talked about the psychological aspect, and definitely, sometimes, we are very strict to our timings, and we are strict to our lifestyle, and that flexibility is lost somewhere. And because of that, there are a lot many, what we can say, frustrations and disappointment comes. So definitely one should include all these aspects in our life. So the flexibility should be there, and always don't try to be a perfectionist, very important thing. What we can see that, sometimes we may have to go out of the track, it is not like on a particular line only we have to walk. But my question is, the mind and the psyche of the person is very dynamic. There is no perfect yardstick to measure, what kind of thinking I'm having, and what kind of, how much, the love and affection and the compassion is there with me. So how to measure it and how to utilize it, that is my question. Thank you.
Yes, I think that because like with everyone being so different, and how to do, is that kind of what I'm understanding? Like how to, like, since everyone is so different with different experiences and all.
Yeah, even I think even if there is a one kind of incidence, but the reaction of every individual is very different. Their understanding is different. Their perception is very different. So what I feel, what I'm doing is right, maybe wrong for the other. So what do you think about this?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. I think that for me, it has helped immensely to do valueless. There is a great book that Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I really love this book. It was written, I think there's a couple revisions, but I read that, and he really talked about embracing your values and what are values. So there's a bunch, if you Google search or search on the internet, like they'll come up with 50 lists of, or 50 adjectives of different words. So maybe like knowledge, nature, exploring, wisdom, service. There's all sorts of things. And so after reading that book, I tried to think about that. Because all these lists, they recommend you to select 3 to 5 values on them. And everyone's different. Like there's at least 50, some have 100. Everyone is different. But if you select a few of those, then it's kind of, I feel like opening up a window to what we call our inner child. What is it that makes us sparkle inside or dazzle inside? The podcaster Andrew Huberman talks about that. Like, what makes you dazzle? And so for me, I saw travel, exploration, learning. Those are my top 3 values. So I try to counteract when I'm feeling down or feeling like I need to have control, that perfection. How can I embody those values? So, and that's different in different stages of my life and whatever your value is. But for me, I know adventure, traveling. So I will take my kids, they're young. We'll just go on walks. We'll go on walks, identify like walnuts, have heart shapes in them. So we go and look for those, and that is helping my values. Or maybe it's like acts of service. Maybe that's someone's value. So try to incorporate that into your life. I think identifying what makes you dazzle, what makes you sparkle inside, and then trying to incorporate that into your life and honoring that part of you can be so helpful, because you're right. Everyone is so different with different life experiences, different things that we enjoy, we don't enjoy. But reflecting on that, I think, is so important. And I think for me, that's been very helpful. So great question. And it looks like...
Thank you very much, ma'am. Wonderful explanation you had given. Thank you. Wow, your presentation was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Ma'am, your presentation was wonderful. I just wanted to ask one question, that is your 5:1 formula.
Yes.
I think it's an excellent formula for self-healing. What do you say?
I agree. I think that's great. And I really, and it's all like the credit, like John Gottman, he is an incredible researcher with all of that. But I was thinking, like, everyone says you have to work on yourself, you have to do this. And it's like, yeah, the relationship starts with yourself. It starts like before you can have relationships with others, in my opinion, or at least for me. I feel like I have to accept myself, and maybe not before, because I think part of having relationships with people helps me to become that. They inspire me. So it's more just recognizing that there is that relationship with ourselves in addition
you need to talk
others.
to yourself more.
Yes. Because how many thoughts are in our head every day? I mean, I feel like we're talking to ourselves more than anyone else, right? Like, I don't know what the number is of a typical, day, but we're always talking to ourselves. And is that talk positive or is it negative? And if it is negative, which mine is sometimes, just giving myself grace and saying, you know what, that was a negative thought, and let me try and counteract that now. Let me write that down or take note of that for later. Sometimes at the end of the day, before I go to sleep, I try to say like what I'm in my mind, like what I'm thankful for, or maybe in the beginning of the day, whatever works. But I do really love to incorporate that practice into my life more so. And it just helps to get me out of my own head sometimes. Because a lot of times
Excellent.
Yes.
Because it makes you lighter and think in a more positive way.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am,
so
for
much.
such a wonderful deliberation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I just want to bring the attention. It's not a question, it is a comment. I was raised in Indian culture 85 years back, where it was taught others always come first.
Mm.
And that is the problem up till today. I feel thinking about others, not about myself. Sometimes I overdo, I get hurt, I get judged by others that I am buying others.
Mm.
But my teachings have been ingrained so much in my soul that I always think about others, and in the process I get hurt. But I am learning to be like unconditional love. I don't care what others judge, but I am trying to shower the love to others. That's my way of teachings. But I have to find the compromise.
Yes. And that's beautiful. I love that. And I'm reminded as you say that of when I was in Acadia National Park, which is in Maine, in the United States. There was a child who threw a little pebble into the pond there. And for some reason, it was hitting the pond. The sun was hitting the pond in a certain way that the ripples were just really exaggerated. And I took a picture of that because I thought that was beautiful, that when you are doing these things for yourself, you are also helping others. Like you're helping inspire others, you're helping with that ripple, but also, helping, but making sure that what kind of ripple am I creating? What ripple effect am I doing? And for me, I think that's helpful to think about. If I embrace this self-love more, this decreasing perfection part of my life, then I can start to create true ripples in the pond that I have. And I think that's just so beautiful. And we all have our own pond to create ripples in. And I just love that we're on this world to do good. And by doing good to ourselves, we're also helping others.
Thank you very much. I appreciate, but I wanted to share with you that I get yelled by my relatives, my mom, why you are doing, wherever I go, I take the brown bag with me. Even if I am going in the restaurant, I take snacks with me and give it to the waiters, not the ones who are serving me, the ones whosoever come in contact with me when I enter. And not that I want their acknowledgement, because few times they shared their stories with me when I gave them some snacks. Oh, thank you very much. I can go to the restroom and eat because I was so hungry. And these kind of thoughts in my mind have ingrained that I am going to the restaurant, paying $100 for the food. I will give extra tip, of course. But when people are hungry and I am eating, my heart doesn't feel happy. So my daughter says something is wrong with me, but it's not something wrong with me. I have very gentle, caring heart. I will give anything to others to feel good, not just that I'm buying anyone, but that is something in me. I don't know.
Yes. Well, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think maybe also recognizing for yourself too, try to feed yourself those feelings too.
I started doing that in my later years now. As I am close to going to God more physically, I am trying to nurture myself. My kids do that, my grandkids do that, and you guys are wonderful. Thank you. Your talk is very, 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 very uplifting.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on one second. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I turned my camera on, but I don't know if you can see me. All right, so I just wanted to say real quick, greetings from Raleigh, North Carolina, Valerie. And thank you for mentioning neuroscience, because that ties into my talk tomorrow. Woohoo!
Oh, that's exciting.
And if I could add one more positive thing for the people out there who are thinking about how important it is to give to others. It's certainly a wonderful attribute, but consider this. If you're constantly pouring out, just think of like a giant pitcher of water. If you're constantly pouring that water out and pouring out and pouring out to others, there's nothing left for you. And it's a great way to burn out. And you will find yourself feeling very depleted. So make sure you pour into yourself once in a while as well.
Yes.
That's a good reminder. Thank you.
Sure
That's a
thing.
great point. There was someone I spoke to about that as well. When you fill your cup, when you fill your own cup, what it overflows, and the overflow gives to others. You're filling your cup and you're overflowing. I love that like analogy too. I think that's such a great example of the cup and all that. Thank you for sharing that.
Prashant Gawande, sir. Please, sir.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Actually, the nice presentation, no doubt. Osho Rajneesh says that the imperfection means death, and perfection means death, and imperfection means life.
Can you repeat that one more time for us?
Yeah. And the nice thing is here, our students are just watching your presentation in the classroom.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
Hello, sir.
That's incredible. Where are you guys at?
It's a speaking class, and they have an opportunity to listen you for 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. Hello from Chicago, Illinois. Hold on one second. Hold on.
Thank you, ma'am.
Here, come on over here. Okay, well, hold on one second. Speaking of embracing imperfection, I have my kids here too.
Some of the sentences and something is beyond there, one can say understanding, but we try our level best to listen them, the listening practice and all these things.
Yes, yes, so true. And you know, with listening, I think that's such an important point that I'm trying to work on more too, of listening more. We talk so much, but what about listening? And what about embracing that? Here, can you close the door, please? Thank you. That's wonderful. James Clear, he is the author of Atomic Habits, and he puts in his book something about being stiff and inflexible is not necessarily life, like you're saying with the imperfection versus perfection. Being stiff and inflexible is like a stick, but life is flexible. We're always growing. It's malleable. Those type of things, like we're always learning. We're always growing. And if we're stuck in our ways and stiff, then we're not learning. And that's what I think is just so beautiful. Another example of like just life and how we can look to nature as to our guide. Sometimes there's so much wisdom there. And I love to think about that as well.
Good evening from India, Hyderabad. Yes, Ahmed from Hyderabad. It's very wonderful presentation regarding embracing the imperfection. My question is very simple. Is embracing is inherited or learned? Because imperfection is, of course, nobody is perfect in this universe. In this context, my question is embracing is inherited or learned?
Oh, like is it learned versus? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not an expert as far as like how much is this learned versus how much have we seen growing up. I know I can speak for myself. I very much inherently was taught to be perfect. So there was very much learned behavior there. But I also think I have the personality as well for that. But I would love to hear if anyone's an expert as to the differences between like how much of this is learned versus born
Because
with.
it is said that human beings by nature is social animal. He is selfish. Person, man or woman by nature is selfish.
Yes.
There's hardly you find inherited quality of embracing the people, embracing anything. The English thing, it is to be learned. It is there should be sort of counseling, there should be sort of mentoring. So this is not hardly you find it is a natural phenomenon in few people only, but majority people like to be taught as to how to embrace people, because there are always distinction between haves and have not. That's what my perception. What do you say about this?
Yes. I think that's, I think we're always learning those things. We're always embracing. Before I became a mom, like when I was starting this conversation, I really thought I would be doing everything perfectly as a mom. And time again, I'm shown that. And that can apply to any part of our lives of like, we want to be perfect. We want to do good. And I think that's a beautiful part of being a human, but also embracing the present moment. I think the brain is a very fascinating time machine. When we travel to the future with worries, with ruminations, hold on a second, please. Hold on one second. Okay. Oh, sorry. Speaking of embracing imperfection.
You need to embrace your kids first.
Yes. Thank you so much. Everyone have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good day to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
मी पण अगदी शॉर्ट मध्येच घेणार होतो सर, कारण हे तेवढी काय